Thanks for having me, Bryan Hicks. I am from the Global Technology Office, working on the cloud go-to-market, right, and the strategy. I have Damani Norman, who is a principal engineer with me, as well as Nushin Soleimani, who's a product manager in this space. But we're going to take a walk down kind of cloud optimized data protection and some of the pillars and some of the technology that we have underneath. So real quick, the agenda, right? We're going to dive in traditional data protection, right? Why optimization is really important. We're going to hit on the cloud native side as well, right? The simplicity of SaaS and some of the technology that we have in that realm. But we're also going to do kind of more of a demo of Cloud Snapshot Manager 2, as the product is just went GA, and we'll make an announcement later here at AWS reInvent, but you'll get to see what's on the truck from us. And then leveraging cloud for disaster recovery, right? As part of optimization, we'll dive into that a little bit. And then obviously we'll do Q&A in real time, right? If you got questions, feel free. But we'll also just at the end, just touch up on any Q&A that we didn't get a chance to cover. So real quick, we have a broad portfolio of cloud solutions. There's no way that we can talk about all of them today, but we're going to really hone in on this in-cloud data protection, right? Because the movement there is pretty strong in the market, as well as extend to the cloud. Really taking my on-prem solutions, right? Use the existing technology stack and extending out there to use the elasticity of the public cloud. And we'll talk specifically about disaster recovery. That's a big market item. But real quickly, the in-cloud protection journey, right? So obviously in the near term, right, a lot of lift and shift happening. So a lot of data protection in cloud happens to be very traditional, right? So as people put, right, big box applications, SQL, Oracle, they tend to need to protect those right now with a traditional backup set. And we'll talk about some of the architectural things there when we dive into it. But as we start to evolve, right, obviously protecting the cloud infrastructure. And how do I do that from a cloud native, and essentially maybe even the convergence of both, right, over time as we evolve. So we're going to talk about both of those, and then we're not going to talk about the long pole in the tent, right, which is platform 3, right, applications. Obviously there's some things in incubation, but we're not going to go there. We're going to stick to these first two pillars, traditional and kind of the near term, which is more the infrastructure protection. So approaches, right? And this is an architectural approach. This isn't really a competitive bash, but traditional approaches. Number one, right? Again, I've got my applications there. What do? I take my product that I have in the enterprise and I put it in the cloud, right? So there's some problems there. Those things may have enterprise scale, right? But I forklift the existing stack and I leverage object storage. Again, I'm not really doing anything transformational, but I'm using this technology on-prem. I'm going to use it in the cloud as well, but some of those things don't have deduplication. So the cost of storage utilization is very high. And then the second approach, which is, hey, I'm going to leverage deduplication. I get some advantages there, right? I have some medium scale because dedupe takes a lot of performance. And I do use S3 as well, because that's the predominant kind of draw. But the problem there is dedupe has some disadvantages in the cloud if you don't do it correctly. But we're going to talk about those. And it has high cost, but from a different premise, right? The performance of the dedupe is causing, right, the high cost, and that's not necessarily, right, the use of storage. And then there's kind of our approach, and that's kind of why we dubbed it optimized cloud data protection. We didn't just want to take what we have and stick it out there because it can have some of those approaches, right? Have some of those high cost with storage, or the high cost of CPU and deduplication if we don't fix the approach. So I think one of my colleagues talked about architecture matters, and I think he covered this just real at a high level, but we're going to dive into a little bit of what we did in this traditional approach. So first, lighter compute and block resources. Right, what do I mean by that? Essentially, I have two components. Right, I have a server in this stack. We're talking about networker, and I have a cloud appliance. Right, but here's kind of the comparison when I talk about differences in dedupe. Right, if I just throw what I have. Right, the first approach is I use like a C4 8x large, right, to do dedupe, right, versus kind of just the generic M4 processor in the AWS world, if you will. These are instances in the cloud. The cost for CPU that's the difference, is 4 times as high, right? So that's the difference in components when you're not very optimized, right? So I have the next piece is client direct backups, if you will, right? So the separation of the metadata, right? And I'm distributed among the clients. So I got client direct backup, and the data is sent dedupe from the client directly to the object store. So I separate those roles. What does that look like? Right? So first, right, the client agent, which acts in a very distributive manner, the more clients I have, right, talks to the cloud appliances and says, hey, do you seen this, right? No, here's some of the delta differences. I don't have file XXX or the block. This is what you need to send, right, to the object store, right? Right? So it says, hey, here's the URLs you need to write to, those chunks, right? Does a URL signing, right, assigns them, and it says, hey, right, I go ahead and the client compresses them and then writes, right, those to the object store. The object store acts back, says I have them, and essentially the metadata map is updated then to contain where those are, right? Again, this very distributive framework when I do this across the clients and this Cloud Boost appliance, if you will, right? The other thing is security, right? So I mentioned URL request signing, obviously, but the data transfer over SSL, right? And then the 256-bit encryption. But here's the thing, the encryption keys, when I separate the metadata and the data, I never send those keys to the object store. They are stored on this appliance, essentially here, and not on the object store. So an advantage there from an encryption standpoint. Now I do have the option, the configurations, right, from this networker server. It's very advantageous in the cloud, right, because things do go wrong sometimes. And how do I get that thing back up to be able to do backup and recovery as I move my enterprise applications over to the public cloud? I can essentially take the configurations and send those over to the object store. So if they fail, I could rapidly recover them, right, from the object store. Now, when I do this, essentially I will have a copy of the metadata, right? So the metadata in that case would go along with it, but I can encrypt that with a separate key, right, than the keys that are sent with every chunk during this process map.
Okay, wait, don't go anywhere.
Yep.
I just need to clarify what the different pieces are here.
Yep.
So you have the networker server, that is the master server that's living in the cloud.
That's correct.
As an EC2 instance, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the M4 processor. Yep.
Okay, so the cloud appliance, what technology is that?
So that is actually a former acquisition, right? So Imaginatics. What'd you say? Imaginatics, the Imaginatics file system. Yeah. So that's the file system that we use, but it too is an M4, right? Linux-based, right?
Fine.
Appliance.
There's no problem.
All
And
right.
the object storage obviously is S3, right?
Yes. Yep.
That's I just wanted to didn't know the pieces.
Good. No, fair questions. Now here's the impact, right? Of just the approaches, right? So I mentioned, right, the S3 only approach. Again, it's got enterprise scale. I just take what I have and I want to provide enterprise backup, but I'm not doing any dedupe, just writing it to S3 with compression. But here's the cost, right? And I think my colleague sent you the ESG study that we did on this, but I wanted to show you the bigger map, right, from 20 terabytes all the way to 400. So you got a good indication of the scale, right? And then we have the S3 with deduplication, right? Uses very large processors, right? The C8. Right, 4x large. Essentially, right, you can see the scale there with dedupe. Now when I optimize this and I distribute them on the clients, this is where I get this kind of optimized, where it's a balanced approach, right? So I am doing the dedupe, but I'm also not using the high processor utilization of every single component in the stack. And essentially, as this thing scales out, from the high-end mark, the approach, you get a 68% kind of drop in, this is the cloud infrastructure bill. It has nothing to do with the technology cost, but just the cloud infrastructure bill that you would receive from protecting the same amount of data, from 20 to 400 terabytes. And then from the midterm approach, which has some dedupe, you get about 50. So it's always, when you look at even from 20 all the way to 400 terabytes, you still always because this kind of scales out in a linear fashion, you always have this kind of 50% less cost by this approach, right, in this stack.
When you're getting those numbers, you're assuming full backups to the cloud, or full backups over
Yeah,
and over
so
again,
this approach was using a 1 full 6 incremental approach, right?
and weekly.
And weekly, 1 full every week for 4 weeks,
Okay, so
right, in this
4 times.
study.
Got
Yeah.
it. Thanks.
Why does anybody still run weekly, full, daily, incremental?
Because it's how we've always done it. Rob.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
but we did it that way because if I did monthly full, daily, incremental, I'd have to find 35 tapes to restore from. We don't back up to tape anymore. Everything should be incremental forever.
You're making sense. Cut it out.
Yeah, so it's a fair question, and I go around the world, and you would just be amazed, right? I ask that same question, but people feel good. It's just like the tape days. They've done it that way. They have something tangible, right? So it's a very fair question, but a lot of customers still do it that way,
Changing.
right? Day in and day out.
Changing.
Do you think also that people don't trust the synthetic side, the rebuild from a synthetic?
That's
So
changing.
they do a full every so often just to
Refresh
make
it.
sure they don't have to trust.
I think it's force of habit, and if I'm
I think that's some of
changing,
it.
if I'm changing my whole platform and I'm going to AWS, then this is the way we've always done it in our data center. Is the worst possible reason to do it in AWS.
Yeah.
Well, you remember,
And it's a bad reason to do it when I'm building a new data center. It's a disgusting reason to do it in the cloud.
so that's why we kind of talk about the traditional method. Again, they do it traditionally. This is the traditional way that they've always done it. We're going to hit the
Yeah,
cloud native approach here in a minute.
Excuse me, I'm really
Baffled? Yeah.
uninterested in optimizing stupidity.
Yeah, hey, understood, right? I'm with you. However, right, a lot of organizations are out there moving these applications. They may not understand some of the cloud premises, right? Give them the benefit of the doubt, but they are using these technologies.
Yeah,
So
We're
understand it.
educators, you're selling products. So
Hey,
so you can say, well, I'll sell you something to let you optimize your stupidity. I'll just point out the stupidity and go, maybe you should do something smarter.
we do educate on that, and again, quite frankly, depending
Yes,
on
I
the
know,
size.
but sometimes it just doesn't sink in.
I'm with you. It doesn't.
It's an uphill battle.
Right. So anyway, I won't bore you. You get it. I won't bore you with the specifics, but obviously there is a turn of the crank for how do I kind of optimize what I have, and if I move out there to the cloud, if they use the existing technology stack, how do I save some? And this is one of the realms. Now, let's kind of dive into the next approach, if you will, right? And we'll kind of skip some of this, but here's an example, right? Service providers. Again, they go out there, and a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't want to be in this business. How do I optimize?" Hey, look, we can move your workloads there. If you're moving applications, DXC is a good example of this, right? They use the Dell EMC stack here to make that happen across numerous clients, right, and throughout their portfolio. So it's an offering they have. Now, cloud native data protection, which very interesting topic is, hey, I'm not interested in some of the old way, but it still exists, right? Challenging and protecting instances in the cloud. So now I've moved applications over there, whether they're native or maybe they are traditional. How can I protect those in a new way? And we can do that in the cloud infrastructure today, right? AWS has a way I can create snapshots. The problem is that platform's not really friendly to the backup administrator, folks who actually understand I got to create copies and I have to have that protected, right? It's a very loose API and it's not very friendly, right? So it's and then the number of snapshots not very scalable. Right? So how do I bring clarity back to that world? Because we know that developers and people move stuff out there, and their first turn of the crank is, well, they may not know that traditional data protection. They don't know anything about those products, but they still have to protect them at the end of the day. So how do I do that? Well, I make snaps. Right? The problem is if they don't know anything about protection, the sprawl tends to get out of control, and so does their cloud bill, and they really can't make sense of it. So we talk about, right, cloud snapshot manager, right? So this is new. You guys are kind of the first to have a peek at it. But look, we're bringing clarity, so I can discover and really orchestrate this process now in a framework that not only makes sense to maybe the developers and brings ease of use to them, but to the kind of traditional backup and recovery guys that don't want the burden of doing it the old way, or maybe we're looking for a different realm, like, hey, I don't want to do this the old way. I actually want to bring some efficiency here and leverage the cloud for what it's used for. But the goal here is say, hey, look, I want to reduce the sprawl and the number of snapshots. If my organization only needs 5 copies, right, of something, I want to be able to provide that, not have to hunt through scripts and figure out where it is on the AWS bill. And then having multi-tenancy capabilities is obviously there. As I go across the org, right, more business units, I want to be able to have multiple accounts that protect multiple parts of the businesses and applications. But providing this in a SaaS, right, framework. So there's nothing that they have to deploy, right? There's no hardware or software kit. It's essentially a SaaS portal that I can log into, and I can scale up or down, right, as my business is needed. That's really a driver of the public cloud inherently to begin with. So why software as a service, right? It's not hard to understand, but obviously some folks kind of, again, they want to touch and feel some of that old stuff that they used to have, but essentially provides, right, a secure and efficient framework. Again, there's no moving parts or pieces. So I just have to worry about the consumption or the instance count, not necessarily do I need another server. So there's a lot of agility that comes with this. Software updates, right, everything that comes along, right, the stack, and not having to deal with traditional hardware and software kits and updates. And then obviously, right, the uptime from being able to provide that, right, to our customers at an enterprise scale, always on demand service, right? So they don't have to worry about that from an operations perspective. So let's dive into this. So here it is a little, this is logical, and again, we're gonna dive, Nushin is gonna dive under the covers and really get into this and show it to you live. But essentially, right, some of the things that I take advantage of, tag-based policy, so I can tag the instances. So now I can really understand when I'm doing it, whether those are business unit or application specific, auto-discover the instances, right? What's out there? If I'm an organization that have moved thousands of these things over there, this is of great value because I can see what those are. But the biggest piece is orchestrating the snapshot management and having a tool that I can now see what I'm protecting and apply those policies to be able to protect those things. Again, how many copies do I need? How many snapshots do I need? I don't need 100, right? I only need 5. That's what the business requires. That's what I'm going to protect. And then some of the advantages here, preserving instance dependencies. So an example, if I have an EC2 machine, that's essentially, there's another SQL instance that's running in a different machine or a file volume that's associated with that, I can snap in order and make sure that I have those things in there chained together, so I always know what those are. And then being able to restore within the same, right, or alternate availability zone is important. But the big thing here is provided to you from the Dell EMC SaaS portal that you subscribe to. And again, this allows the agility for you to be able to protect on day one, right? I don't, forgive me for not having the specifics, but I think we did some tests. It's literally just a couple minutes to be able to, time to protect once you have a cloud account.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
You're using S3, pure Amazon S3. Is there any way to spin up my own S3 compatible system on-prem and use that for repatriating data?
Not today. This is strictly in cloud right now.
This is strictly Amazon today.
Strictly Amazon today.
Is it a 1.0 product right now? Is this a version 1 product right now?
It's actually beyond that. So we were going to release it last year, but quite frankly, did some updates. But for the public market, yes, it is a 1.0. It's like a 1.5x release for us.
Right. Okay. I mean, so we're backing up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yep. Can I use outside the US zones also?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Are there any zones that aren't? There's a few zones. I mean, some government, but what's?
Yeah, Greater China. We don't support the China cloud, but other than that, We support everything. And Gulf Cloud is not supported either for the time being.
What about plans for Azure?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Will I?
I don't want to get into roadmap, but yes,
Fine.
the more we get into it, it's like, well, when, how,
no.
but yes, absolutely.
If that is the case, is the general idea, the principle, I'm not going to hold you to this, but is the principle that you'll be able to back up your EC2 instances to Azure to get multi-cloud?
Yeah, so you're talking about replication from one cloud to another.
Just back up from one to the other.
Right. So that's those are the next steps. But yes, the first priority is to get support for Azure. So from a single pane of glass, they can see across and protect their workloads in multiple clouds.
Are there plans to also bring backups back to on-prem for customers that want to have that kind of
Why would
mobility?
anyone want to do a thing like that?
I don't know. The last 5 clients I have just did that. So.
I guess we don't want to get too much into the roadmap. We say that we should not be talking anything that's under NDA. So I
Okay, so
try
right
to not
now
answer this
it's not
question.
there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Got it.
Coincidentally, I like this guy over here. I don't know your name. I apologize, but we do. Why would anybody?
He doesn't know your
Why
name.
would anybody
He doesn't
want
know
to
your
do
name.
that?
I haven't been anonymous in a long
Yeah,
Well, we had things up yesterday, didn't we? We had
Yeah.
things up.
yeah. Well, you kind of.
I'm Howard Marks, and you should be afraid of me.
All right, Howard. Well, you're articulating the challenges because you will be surprised the amount of customers they do bring that up.
Yeah, they
They're
do.
like, hey, I'm not real comfortable. We have to make this move, but I want to know that I can be able to get that back, right, and on-prem, and I want a way to do that. It happens in more conversations than you would think, and they want that capability.
Well, I mean, to be more serious, the one I see all the time is, well, AWS looks really cheap. Look, it's only 3 cents per gigabyte per month, and it's only 20 cents per instance per minute. And nobody does the math. They go, well, there's 24 hours in a day and 30 days in a month. And then that means that it adds up to, oh yeah, that EC2 instance actually costs more than a DL380.
I think more and more customers want to have an exit strategy from the cloud. So that's why they want to bring it back on-prem, or they want to bring it from one cloud to another. So it's more of an exit strategy. This is what we're hearing from our customers.
A costly one, but they want it nonetheless. So multi-tenancy features, obviously I can have multiple accounts, right? I can pull them in there, right? So I can, those accounts obviously from the AWS IAM perspective can see different things, if you will. But essentially multiple users. And then in future support, I know we're not supposed to talk about roadmap, but we'll actually have more of a RBAC, a true RBAC process where we can limit certain things. There can be different functions than just one user going into an account. Like, hey, just read only, maybe you want to audit this, right, et cetera. So with that, nope, I will give you the marketing props before since this is new and we are live, right before we get into the demo. Obviously, right, so software as a service protection, no moving parts or pieces, right? Highly scalable. Again, the more workload that this is for thousands and thousands and thousands of snapshot. From 10 to thousands, right, that they can literally use this. No hardware or software, easy use. Nushin's gonna show you kind of the UI. It's really built on simplicity and not a lot of rigmarole with how you have to manage things. Multi-tenancy, and I will point this out, and it's not of high value in this topic, but it does come from a provider. We do see some folks in the space doing that, and they're very small companies, and it's still, when you look at Dell EMC or any vendor of our size, to be able to have the support mechanism to actually do this, right, in AWS and later on Azure is of high value when you talk about the scale and the magnitude of the reach.
So what's the sweet spot for you guys to be measured or be used by what kind of companies? SMB, enterprise, what?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, it's a range. We've had in beta some huge customers, right? Some huge financials, some huge telecom corporations, all the way to like the local county courthouse that's moved some applications out there, and so it is of wide reach. I think over the next couple of years, as more people put applications and workload out there, this essentially allows them kind of hey, I know the ease of protect is there. So the market for us, there's a huge TAM.
Okay.
These customers that you've been working with on this, have you got any use cases of the feedback from them for the development of how this has gone? So what's their feedback on realistically?
You want to talk about a few of
Yes,
those?
absolutely. So this product was built from the ground up with the input from our customers. They came to us and said, hey, this is the headache that we're having. How are you going to solve it? So they literally participated in all the UI design, all the capabilities, and we incorporated many of their feedbacks as part of a long beta cycle that we had. So yes, we built it with these 10, 12, 15 customers that really wanted to work with us on this project.
And what sort of workloads have they been actually putting up there?
Yeah.
We've had customers in Australia who basically had evaluated our product against, competition and in a more traditional way of backup in terms of restore. They had multi-terabyte, like 4 or 5 terabyte size database that they were trying to restore using snapshots versus the traditional way. And he was saying that in terms of the restore time, it's matter of minutes versus hours when you get down to multiple terabytes of data. So they've tested out to that extent.
Right, okay. So for the restores, was there any costs or anything done around that for how much you're taking to get the data back and what data you're putting up there?
No. So this is basically the way AWS charges is based on the snapshot bucket. So they charge you for the amount of storage that you consume in the snapshot bucket, and they don't charge you for the restores.
Yeah. So I got a project on deck where we're going to go back to the traditional side and kind of see what the differences are, because I think we do have a lot of customers asking that question. Like, all right, this is good, but one of my objectives for moving to the cloud is to save money. So is this going to be advantageous for me? We're just not there yet to kind of see that. All right.